She got slapped, right there in front of 20 people, and not a single one said a word. Rachel stood frozen, face, burning breath. Shaky fingers curled into her apron. Not because she was brave, but because she didn't know where to put her shame, her eyes, her hands. The floor that wouldn't open up and swallow her. The woman with the stroller turned away. The security guard scrolled his phone. Even the guy with the overpriced coffee stared at a plant like it had answers. Then, a voice cut through the silence. Low, calm, dead serious. "Touch her again, and I'll bury your name before the mall hears your scream." Rachel turned. She didn't know the man, but he wasn't blinking. If you've ever seen something cruel and wondered why no one stopped it, maybe this story is for you. Rachel Monroe wasn't anyone special. 30 years old, divorced, no kids, no college degree, no savings. Just a 2-room apartment above a dry cleaner and a job that paid in compliments and commission, both of which were rare. 6 days a week she opened the boutique at Grand Oak Mall, steamed dresses, Windexed mirrors, smiled until her jaw ached. Never late, never loud, never noticed. She wore neutral tones, kept her hair tied back, and always tucked the tag of her uniform under the collar because she'd once heard someone say, "If they see your name, they think they own you." No one knew her story. That she once loved music. That she used to dream of opening her own vintage shop. That she left a man who drained her account and her voice. To most people, she was the quiet girl at the register. The one who refolded what others wrinkled. The one they forgot. 5 steps after passing her. That Saturday wasn't supposed to be different. Rachel showed up 30 minutes early like always. The mall was still half asleep, coffee carts rolling out floors freshly waxed, the air smelling like cinnamon and bleach. She unlocked the boutique, turned on the lights, and did what she always did, checked the price tags, straightened hangers, steamed the hem of a navy gown no one would buy. She didn't expect joy. She didn't even expect kindness. Just a smooth shift. 8 hours of pretending she didn't hear the sighs, the clicks of impatience, the judgment tucked behind pursed lips. By noon, the place was buzzing. Couples drifted in and out. Teenagers tried on lipstick they didn't buy. And Rachel, she stood behind the counter watching it all like someone watching a party through glass. She thought she knew what kind of day it would be. The kind where no one remembers your name. She was wrong. Someone was about to say it, loud enough for the whole mall to hear. It started like trouble usually does, quiet and well-dressed. Rachel saw her before she entered. A cream-colored suit, shoes that didn't scuff, hair that looked expensive and untouched by weather. The kind of woman who made silence feel like pressure. She didn't look around. She didn't smile. She walked in like she'd been here before and expected it to be worse than she remembered. Rachel stepped forward. "Welcome in. Let me know if I can help you find anything." The woman didn't answer at first. She just turned slowly and looked Rachel up and down, not with curiosity, with the cold precision of someone scanning for flaws. Then she spoke. "I have a gala tonight. Corporate, very selective crowd." A pause. "I need something appropriate." And then, almost like a weapon, "I assume you understand how important impressions are." Rachel smiled. "The kind you practice in mirrors?" "Yes, ma'am. I do. But inside?" Something sank. Because some women carry handbags. Others carry knives made of words. Some women ask for help. Others demand it like it's owed. Rachel led her to the evening wear rack, pulling a soft burgundy gown, simple lines, elegant neckline. "I think this could work beautifully for a formal evening." The woman barely touched it. Too heavy. Rachel tried again, a navy wrap dress with subtle beading. Too safe. A champagne satin column piece. Too secretarial. There wasn't even a pause between her cuts, as if dismissing beauty was her way of proving power, but Rachel had been in retail long enough to know. It wasn't about the dress. It was about control. So she stayed calm. Let the storm pass around her. "May I ask, will it be indoor or outdoor? Seated dinner or cocktails?" she asked gently, hoping to narrow the choices. But the woman just sighed. "I don't expect you to understand." Rachel didn't answer, not because she agreed, but because sometimes silence is the only thing that doesn't feed the fire. Of course Rachel smiled. That was the job, even when the words stung like vinegar in a paper cut. She hung the rejected dresses back on their hangers, slow, careful, pretending they were just fabric, not pieces of herself being folded and returned. The woman, Victoria, wandered further into the boutique, touching gowns like they were beneath her fingertips. Rachel followed, gently pulling a new option. Here's one from our designer line. It just arrived yesterday. Victoria took it, glanced at the price tag, and raised an eyebrow. Does this store offer dignity discounts? Rachel froze for half a second, then tucked the smile back where it belonged. Behind her, someone let out a breath too loud, one of the shoppers pretending not to listen. But Rachel didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that in places like this the insult wasn't the worst part. It was how easily people believed they had the right to say it. Rachel didn't answer right away. She held the hanger gently, like it might bruise if she squeezed too tight. For a moment, she could feel her own reflection behind the dressing room mirror, a quiet woman in a blouse that never quite fit, a face that faded into the wallpaper, someone who had spent years learning how not to take up space. She'd heard worse than dignity discount. From customers, from her ex, from that little voice at 2 a.m. that asked if maybe they were all right about her. But she still showed up, still did the work, still called everyone ma'am or sir, even when they snapped their fingers like royalty. That, too, was a kind of grace. So she placed the gown on the nearby hook, turned toward Victoria, and said, "We do our best to offer value, but sometimes dignity costs full price." The woman scoffed. But someone somewhere in the store clapped. Just once. Then pretended it didn't happen. If Rachel noticed the sound behind her, she didn't show it. The soft chime of the boutique door, a rustle of coat fabric, a step too steady for a weekend shopper. She stayed focused on Victoria, who was now flipping through dresses with the annoyance of someone searching for a lost diamond in a bargain bin. But from the far edge of the room, someone was watching. Not leering, not judging, just observing, like a man scanning a chessboard and seeing pieces before they move. He stood by the cologne counter, didn't speak, didn't touch anything, just took in the scene, the woman in pearls, the salesgirl in gray, and the quiet tension between them. Victoria, of course, didn't notice, because people like her never look twice at men who don't make noise. But Rachel... She felt something shift, like when the wind changes direction. You don't see it, you just know something's coming. Rachel reached for a new option, a deep green silk dress with a modest neckline and clean silhouette. Simple, elegant, unbothered by trends. "This one tends to photograph well," she said, voice steady. Victoria turned to look, took it from Rachel's hands like she was handling something fragile, or contaminated. She held it up to the light, paused, then let it fall back against the rack like a dropped opinion. "This?" She raised an eyebrow. "It looks like something a senator's wife would wear to her 4th funeral." Someone stifled a laugh near the doorway. Rachel didn't move. Victoria leaned in her tone, dropping to that quiet kind of cruelty. "Tell me, did someone tell you you were stylish once and you believed them?" Rachel said nothing. But her hand, the one still holding the hanger, tightened just slightly, and in the mirror behind them, that same man was still watching, still unmoving. But now he wasn't watching the dresses, he was watching her. Of course Rachel didn't answer, because by now she knew the rules. You don't feed cruelty with protest. You outlast it quietly. She turned, refolded a nearby shawl, and let Victoria's words hang in the air like perfume no one asked for. But her shoulders, they dropped just slightly, and her fingers, they trembled just once before she tucked them behind her back. Victoria kept talking, of course. She's cute, she told no one in particular. Quiet girls like this usually are, until you ask them to think. That was the moment Rachel looked up only for a second. Not angry, not defiant, just tired. And sometimes tired is more dangerous than rage, because it means you've stopped hoping they'll change. Somewhere behind the perfume shelf the man shifted his weight. Not a step, just enough to let his coat fall open, revealing something small and silver clipped at his belt. It wasn't flashy, but it wasn't nothing either, and Rachel saw it. Even if she pretended she didn't, Rachel took a breath. Not deep, not obvious. The kind you take when you're trying to keep something from spilling over. Her hand hovered above a velvet clutch, pretending to smooth it. But her mind wasn't on the bag. It was on the woman behind her, the voice that had been cutting her all morning slice by slice, and the weight of 100 moments just like this one. Times she smiled instead of snapping. Times she bent instead of breaking, because people like Victoria didn't yell. They peeled, layer by layer until you weren't sure what was left. Rachel turned slightly, enough to face her, not enough to challenge her. "Would you like to see something from our private collection?" It was a simple question, but her voice, low and level, had an edge to it now, And just like that, the man by the cologne shelf moved. Not toward them, but closer, like a tide pulling in inch by inch. For a moment, Victoria didn't speak. She simply blinked slow, offended, like Rachel had just offered her a used napkin instead of a designer dress. "Private collection," she repeated, her voice sharp around the edges. "Do you even know what that means?" Rachel held her ground. "Yes, ma'am. It means quality over quantity." That was the final thread. Victoria stepped closer, heels silent on the rug, but meaning loud enough to echo. She leaned in close enough for Rachel to smell the mint on her breath and the bitterness beneath it. "You work in a mall?" she whispered. "You probably live above a laundromat. You sell clothes you can't afford to wear." She let the words hang like perfume, one that didn't fade. "And you think you have the right to speak to me as if we breathe the same air?" Rachel didn't flinch. But inside, something snapped. Not loud, not visible, but real, and somewhere behind her a man's hand slowly left his coat pocket. It happened so fast no one caught it in time, not even the ones watching closely. Victoria's hand rose like a question mark, then came down like a period. The sound cracked through the boutique like a glass falling in church, not just loud, wrong. Rachel staggered half a step, not from the force, but from the shock. Her cheek flushed red bright against the soft gray of her uniform. Her mouth didn't open. Her eyes didn't water. She just stood there, very still. Because sometimes the most painful part isn't the hit. It's the part where 20 people hear it and none of them move. The mother in the corner turned her child around. The teenage girls near the makeup counter froze like mannequins. The security guard outside the door shifted his weight and looked away. Rachel blinked once, then once more, and in that strange suspended silence, a single breath behind her answered what no one else did. And then someone spoke. Not loud, not rushed, but heavy, like it had waited long enough. "Touch her again," he said, "and I'll bury your name before the mall hears your scream." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to, because every head turned, not toward Victoria, but toward the man standing 2 feet behind her. He hadn't moved much, hadn't raised his voice, but something in the way he stood, coat unbuttoned, gaze fixed, made the whole boutique feel colder. Victoria turned slowly, like someone not used to being spoken to that way. "I beg your pardon," she said, her voice tightening. "But Rachel..." Rachel finally looked at him too, and in that moment the room shifted, because she'd never seen him before, but somehow he looked at her like he had seen everything. Not just the slap, the whole hour before it, and maybe just maybe something longer than that. He didn't need to repeat himself. The silence around him did the rest. Rachel was still frozen in place, cheek flushed, hand barely lifted to touch it. Victoria, on the other hand, turned fully now, lip curled, voice sharp. "Excuse me," she said. "Who even are you?" He didn't answer right away. Just stepped forward, one calm stride. Not fast, not threatening, just certain. Then he placed himself beside Rachel, not in front of her, not between her and Victoria, beside her, as if to say, this woman doesn't need a shield, just someone who stands with her. "You assaulted her," he said, voice level, "in front of witnesses." "She was rude," Victoria shot back. "You hit her," he interrupted. "Let's start there." Someone near the window whispered, "Is he with security?" Someone else said, "I think I've seen him before." But Rachel didn't say anything, because for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel alone. Victoria opened her mouth ready to spit something sharp, but what came out wasn't defiance, it was doubt. "I didn't mean to hurt her," she said. "It was just frustration." The service was unacceptable. The man didn't move, didn't blink. He simply looked at her like a locksmith sizing up a broken lock. "You slapped an employee," he said, "in public, with witnesses and phones." He didn't say it as a threat. He said it like a fact that had already happened. Around them, the boutique had fallen into full hush. Even the background music seemed to turn itself down. Rachel finally let her hand drop from her cheek. She wasn't crying, but she wasn't pretending anymore either. Victoria folded her arms, looking around the store like it had betrayed her, then narrowed her eyes. "And who are you exactly?" she asked. The man smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind that says you should have asked that question 10 minutes ago. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned slowly like a man who knew every eye in the room was watching, but didn't mind it. His suit was tailored but not flashy. Shoes clean, posture calm, No badge, no name tag, no entourage, just presence. "I'm someone who pays attention," he said. "Someone who doesn't like seeing good people treated like furniture." Victoria stiffened. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now." And then he turned to Rachel. Not with pity, not with performance, just directness. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, then paused, and, in the kind of voice that cracks just a little at the edge, she answered, "I didn't expect anyone to say anything." He didn't blink. "Most people don't. That's why I do." There it was, a sentence that felt less like a rescue and more like a reset. Something in the air shifted, because now Rachel wasn't the only one standing alone. Victoria scoffed. "I don't know what game you're playing, but this isn't your store." The man didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He just reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a slim, black card. He handed it to the assistant manager who had just crept out from behind the curtain like someone hoping not to be seen. The young man looked at it, blinked, and straightened his posture like a soldier called to attention. Yes, sir." "Of course," he said. "Right away." Victoria frowned. "What is this? Are you with corporate?" The man didn't answer her. Instead, he turned to the assistant and said, "Pull the security footage, archive it, and flag legal." That's when the murmurs started. Someone whispered, "Wait, is he?" Another voice hushed. "That's Daniel Rourke, isn't it?" And just like that, the air in the boutique changed. Victoria wasn't holding court anymore. She was holding her breath. "Daniel Rourke." Victoria said it slowly, like tasting something she didn't order. He nodded once. No need to explain, because the name explained itself. Daniel Rourke, founder of Rourke & Slate, owner of 5 retail brands including the one she was standing in. A man who'd made his fortune building quiet things back-end systems supply chains networks no customer ever saw. But every customer used. And now the man behind the curtain was standing in her light. Victoria blinked. The sharpness in her voice dulled to a cautious edge. I didn't realize you were involved with this location." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I'm involved in all of them." Then he looked back at Rachel, still beside her, still not in front. She didn't deserve that he said simply, "None of what you said, and definitely not what you did." For once, Victoria had no reply. Because when power speaks without shouting, even the loudest people go silent. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He looked at Victoria the way a teacher looks at a student who knows they've crossed the line. Not cruel, but clear. "I think we're done here," he said. Victoria's mouth twitched. "I'm not leaving," she muttered, but even she didn't sound convinced. "I've been shopping here for years. I know the regional manager," and now Daniel cut in. "You'll know legal." The pause after that wasn't long, but it was deep. He turned to the assistant manager again. "Escort her out, please, and log the footage." Victoria looked around the boutique, at the faces that no longer smiled politely, at the phones that weren't recording anymore but hadn't forgotten. She reached for one last scrap of pride. "This isn't over." Daniel gave the faintest nod. "No, it isn't, but you're not the one who gets to finish it." And just like that, the room exhaled, like it had been holding its breath since the slap. Victoria didn't storm out. She didn't get to. She was escorted step by step past the sale racks, past the stairs, past the silence thick enough to scrape against. She didn't meet Rachel's eyes, didn't say a word, because by now she knew. Words wouldn't save her. The boutique door gave a soft chime as it closed behind her, and with that it was over, but not really, because Rachel was still standing in the same spot, still in the same gray blouse, still with the faint shape of a handprint warming her skin. Daniel looked at her, not with pity, just with something quieter, like recognition. "You okay to sit?" he asked. Rachel blinked as if realizing she could move now. She nodded slowly, and in that nod, there wasn't relief. Not yet. But there was something else. The feeling of being seen without needing to explain who you are. He didn't ask for the back office. He just motioned to a quiet bench tucked near the dressing rooms. Rachel followed, still unsure whether her legs were carrying her forward or just away from what had happened. They sat, not too close, not too far. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. It wasn't awkward. It was honest, like both were waiting to see who would name the moment first. Finally, he spoke. "I've seen worse," Daniel said calmly, "but not often." Rachel let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Do you do this a lot?" she asked. "Step in when people get slapped. Only when they don't deserve it," he replied, "which is more often than you'd think." She glanced at him. You could have just walked away. He looked back at her unflinching. So could you, but you didn't. And somehow, that felt like the real beginning of their conversation. Rachel shifted slightly on the bench. Her fingers found the seam of her skirt, started tracing it back and forth like the rhythm might hold her steady. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just let the quiet settle again, like someone who knew that some silences aren't empty, just waiting to be heard. Then gently, he said, "You handled her well." Rachel let out a tired laugh. "I didn't handle her. I just survived her," he nodded. "Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do." There was a pause, and then his voice shifted. "Just a touch. Can I ask you something that might sound strange?" Rachel hesitated. "I think we're past strange today," he smiled. "The first real one, the kind that doesn't ask permission. I have a problem," he said, "a personal one, and I might need someone like you to help solve it." Rachel blinked, not from fear, but from how fast the world can tilt in the quietest moments. Rachel waited, not because she was eager, but because when a man like Daniel Rourke says he has a problem, you don't interrupt, you listen. He rested his elbows on his knees, laced his fingers together, and said it plain. "My grandfather left me the company." Rachel tilted her head slightly. That much she'd already guessed, but he continued. "He left one condition in his will, a pause, like he was still deciding if he should keep going. He believed a man with too much money and no family would forget what matters." Rachel blinked. "He wrote into the inheritance that I had to be married, actually married, by my 32nd birthday. Or everything goes to charity." She almost smiled. "That's dramatic." He didn't. "In 6 months I turned 32. Then he looked at her, carefully. "I don't need love. I don't want headlines. I just need someone real, who knows how to survive storms quietly." Rachel stared at him, and for the first time since the slap, she didn't feel small. She felt chosen. Rachel didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, really looked. The man who had stood between her and a slap. The man who owned the floor beneath her shoes, but hadn't once made her feel beneath him. "What are you saying?" she asked slowly. Daniel met her eyes, not with charm, not with pity, just with a strange kind of steadiness. "I'm saying I need a wife." She let out a small breath, half laugh, half disbelief. "And you're asking me?" "I'm asking someone who's calm under pressure," he said. "Someone who doesn't perform, who doesn't flinch, who's real when everyone else pretends." Rachel blinked. "And what exactly would this wife do he's seen with me?" he replied. "Attend events, dinners, public moments that prove the paperwork isn't a lie." He paused. "And after 1 year we part ways. No strings, but with enough money for you to rewrite the next chapter however you want." It wasn't romantic, but somehow it didn't feel like a transaction either. It felt like a door, quietly opening. Rachel didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't say yes. She just sat there, hands folded, back straight, eyes sharper now, not angry but awake. "Why me?" she asked. Daniel didn't flinch. "I told you." "No," she said gently. "You told me what I am, not why you'd trust me with something this big." He paused, then looked at her not like a boss, not like a savior, like a man remembering something personal. "Because today he said you stood there and took it, and still didn't lose your name." She tilted her head. "And what if I'd screamed, fought back?" "I would have respected that too," he replied. "But you didn't, and it told me something." Rachel waited. "That you know when to act and when not to." The silence stretched again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like she was being seen for the kind of strength no one claps for, and that mattered more than the offer itself. Rachel looked down at her hands. No ring, no polish, just the faint mark of where her skin had been struck and healed. She thought of her apartment, the overdue bills taped to the fridge, the business school catalog folded neatly under her pillow never filled out. She thought of all the moments she'd swallowed hard, and all the doors she never even knocked on because they weren't meant for women like her. Then she looked up. "If I say yes," she asked, "do I still get to be me?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "That's the only reason I asked." She nodded slow, not shaky, the kind of nod that says I'm not stepping into fantasy. I'm walking toward something I've earned. "Okay," she said, and in that one word, there was no sparkle, no music, just quiet resolve, the kind that comes after a lifetime of being told you're not enough and finally saying back, "Watch me." They didn't shake hands, not yet. Instead, they sat a while longer, two people drawing invisible lines in the air between them. Not walls, just boundaries. Rachel was the first to speak. I don't sleep my way through anything, she said. Flat, honest, no blush. Daniel nodded. I don't ask what isn't freely given. She tilted her head. 1 year. That's the deal, 1 year, he confirmed. After that annulment. You walk away, debt-free, tuition covered, whatever you need to start clean. Rachel thought for a second. No press. I control that, he said. They won't touch you. No lies about romance. We'll play what's needed in public, he said, but I won't fake love. That cheapens us both. There was a long pause. Then Rachel exhaled. I want it in writing. Daniel gave a small smile. I already have the draft. I just didn't know who I'd be handing it to. And finally they shook hands. Not like partners in business, but like two people building something steadier than luck. Rachel didn't grab her coat, didn't clean out a locker, didn't even clock out. She just stood up from that little bench, nodded once at Daniel, and walked back through the boutique. No one stopped her. Not the assistant manager, not the shoppers, not the girl who'd watched the slap with her mother and now looked down at her shoes. The store looked the same. The perfume still hung in the air. The dresses still shimmered in the glass. But something had shifted. Rachel wasn't part of that place anymore. She'd outgrown it in a single hour that felt like a lifetime. As she reached the door, Daniel called after her, calm, steady. Rachel, she turned. You'll have a car waiting tomorrow. 10 a.m. She nodded, and when the glass door closed behind her, she didn't flinch, because this time, she wasn't walking away from something. She was walking toward it. She didn't tell anyone that night. Not her neighbor, not her sister, not even the friend who still worked at the same store. Some things you hold close, not because they're secrets, but because they're sacred. Rachel sat on the edge of her bed, still in uniform, holding the draft agreement in her hands. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no rose petals, no glass slippers, no promises of forever, just a contract and a choice. But maybe, for someone like her, that was enough, because in a world that had told her over and over, you don't matter unless someone picks you. She had been picked, not for beauty, not for charm, but for how she stood still and didn't break, and maybe that's the kind of strength some men still believe in. So if you're watching this wondering when your moment will come, maybe remember, sometimes the worst days don't end us, they just introduce us to the version of ourselves we were always meant to become. If this story stirred something in you, hit that like button and maybe share it with someone who's still standing quietly. They might need to know their turn is coming.